Welcome to the Fourth Wall Podcast. In weather, the Weather Channel, if there's a hurricane, they have to talk about the hurricane. It's going to be on the Weather Channel the whole time. We're a movie podcast. That hurricane for us is Avengers Endgame. So we're in a corner here. We have no choice but to talk about it. So, Cody, what's going on with Avengers Endgame?
We are officially in uncharted territory here. Domestic, we're at 676 million, and worldwide, 2.3 billion. So we have about 0.4 billion to go before we've beat Avatar, and Endgame would be the highest grossing film of all time. Some people say this film is front-loaded. You know, once you see it, you've seen it. We've both seen it 2 times. I liked it. I do think that Infinity War and Endgame's Rotten Tomatoes scores should be switched. I think Infinity War is somewhere around 86, and this is somewhere around 95. I think maybe it should be the opposite of that. In general, like I said, I liked it. Maybe 7, 8 out of 10. Although some of it did feel a little bit like an expensive reshoot.
What does an expensive reshoot feel like?
Sometimes to me it feels like, especially in that first hour, 3 different people on 3 different sound stages on 3 different days composited into a single light dialogue shot. And you can tell a bit of it was cut because sometimes there'll be some clear continuity mistakes. You know, Rhodey will be standing on one side of the room, a character will say a joke, and then they'll cut back and Rhodey's somewhere else. So that tells me that they really tried to cut down that first hour, that first act. Especially some of the Captain Marvel stuff felt that way to me.
I thought this movie, it was good. Like, I liked Infinity War. I feel like it was up in that territory of quality. Something with Marvel movies that I just always cringe at when I watch them, the jokes. You know, it's just like, look at the situation we're in, and you're making such a relaxed, silly comment, like, oh, the irony of it. And they just like brought it on hard in this one. It's a machine gun of jokes. Marvel, please hit the brakes on those in future movies. But not to be too negative about it, though. It totally does fly by. That's what everybody said. I'm like, yeah, right, it'll fly by. I saw it twice, and it flew by the second time too. And during both movies, I didn't have to pee once. I think that was just good planning by me. My main takeaway from this movie is the Russo brothers, the ones who directed this movie. They also directed Infinity War. They directed Captain America Winter Soldier, Captain America Civil War. The Russo brothers are just like the best at making action, and Marvel just decided, hey, we're going to commit to action. Like, if we're going to do one thing good, it's going to be action. Russo brothers, we're going to take you and we're going to have you make these 2 finale movies to the series. Cody, do you think the Russo brothers, those 4 movies they did, are they the best Marvel directors?
I don't know if the director matters too much. The story, the aesthetic, all that kind of stuff is handled by Marvel corporate. It's been said that when a director arrives on set at a Marvel movie shoot, everything's already set up for them and ready to go. They've certainly done a great job with the 4 films that they have directed. You know, they started with Arrested Development on TV, and they were more TV guys. So the fact that they have been able to get so good at making these Marvel movies is really awesome for them. I think this could be their wheelhouse. I'd like to see other stuff from them, see what else they do outside of the Marvel universe.
Some other candidates for best Marvel directors. James Gunn did the Guardians of the Galaxy. A lot of people love those. Joss Whedon, who did the first 2 Avengers, and he did Firefly. And then, yeah, I guess I really liked Thor Ragnarok, and that was by Taika Waititi. And then Ryan Coogler did Black Panther. Another thing in movie news was this Sonic movie. If you don't know Sonic, you've probably heard of the video game. It's that little blue hedgehog guy, like rolls around coins. And they're making a movie about him. And then the trailer came out, and there was just tons of backlash. And there was so much that the creators tweeted out like, okay, we get it. Everybody hates the way this Sonic character looks. We're going to reanimate him, create a new character. Cody, did you see this story?
I did see that, and it was a little bit disappointing. Going back to the MCU a little bit, how come they can completely change a character's look and origin, you know, stealing only maybe the name of a character and some elements of their costume, And Marvel fans are just super thankful that they're even getting a movie. They're like, oh my goodness, Hawkeye was just mentioned in the background. Whereas Sonic fans are getting an entire film and they don't really like the look of it, which I get it. It is sort of weird looking. But in general, I do think the filmmakers should stick with their vision, because maybe Sonic matches the production design of the rest of the film. If you have this visual design by committee, now you're just pandering to the audience and you're not making it your own vision.
I guess I could agree with that mindset. Me personally, I'm just glad it doesn't have Ryan Reynolds playing the voice. Although I will be giving Detective Pikachu a chance, though. I'm open to that. Another thing I liked about this Sonic movie trailer, Jim Carrey as the bad guy. Jim Carrey is really good at playing just the weirdest characters. I don't know about you, but his Grinch movie, probably one of the best weird characters of all time. I think he could probably be funny or interesting with that. As far as Sonic video games, it's not like a Mario, it's not like a Halo or anything like that. This whole Sonic thing makes me curious. Has there ever been a good video game movie, like a good one? Like, can they be good at all?
I think almost any idea can be made into a good movie. We've talked a little bit about this in past episodes. And video game franchises have lots of good ideas. If you look at the stories of games like Dishonored, they have awesome stories that I would love to see on the big screen, but not many of them have worked. The first Pokemon film made $86 million domestic on a $30 million budget. And that puts them about somewhere in the ballpark of $15 million profit domestic. That was in 1999, so today it'd be around $22 million. Worldwide, that first one made $163 million. The studio got to keep some of that worldwide money. Making a good film and making a successful film are two very different things. I think that you can have a successful video game movie today, and there have been some, but making a good movie, we haven't seen very many.
First of all, I totally get that they can make money, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're good. Pokemon, I don't really think Pokemon totally counts as movies based on video games. Like, Pokemon is so much more than that. Like, it's a card game, Game Boy game, it's a cartoon show. There's a phone app game that a lot of people still play today that I know like everybody was talking about a couple years ago, but that's still really popular. Pokemon it's basically a giant meme, and I think it like transcends video games at this point. There are movies based on video games making lots of money. The Warcraft, that like weird computer game nerds play, they made a movie on that, and it made over $400 million worldwide on a $160 million budget. So I feel like they can make money, but still the quality is not there. The track record for video games so far is like pure cringe. First of all, that Doom movie that came out with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and that was a laughingstock, especially with the first-person shooter view scene. Another one is Assassin's Creed with Michael Fassbender. I call him Fassbender. I'm pretty sure that Assassin's Creed movie was intentionally horrible. Like, if you watch it, that's the idea I get. Prince of Persia with Jake Gyllenhaal. I think Hollywood just likes to pretend that Prince of Persia movie like never happened. Another game, a phone game, is the Angry Birds movie, and which was actually kind of watchable because the cast is pretty good. Hitman with Timothy Olyphant, not good. I guess there's a Max Payne movie, and I don't know anything about it, but like I just guarantee you it's horrible. The best attempt at a video game movie, I'd say, is the Mario Brothers movie, or it was a really good attempt.
See, I would disagree there. I give them credit for trying something different, but Mario takes place in the Mushroom Kingdom. It's this light, happy, fluffy world, and for some reason, the filmmakers decided to go with a Blade Runner, futuristic sci-fi aesthetic, and it was a risky move, and I just thought it was a major fail. It didn't work at all.
Did you like the little King Koopa bad guys, though?
Not really.
In their big suits. But it had John Leguizamo, who was funny, and then it had the bad guy was a good actor. We're really doing a deep dive here on video game movies, but obviously everybody's favorite video game based on a movie Mortal Kombat, which I say is a great movie.
I would encourage you to watch that again. I saw it a couple years ago, and it has not aged very well. It's really cheesy. The special effects are horrible. The story, the pacing is super early 90s. The only thing I think that's maybe good in that movie is the theme song was kind of cool back then. If I had to pick a good video game movie, I think it falls back to Tomb Raider, unfortunately. It just defaults to that one. The first one was pretty watchable. The second one wasn't as good.
Yeah, that one was pretty good. I think you might be wrong about Mortal Kombat. Remember the scene where Johnny Cage and Scorpion are in the forest and there's all those trees and it was like really scary? Remember the twist at the end where Shao Kahn, the Emperor, comes out at the temple, Sub-Zero freezing people over dinner? Like, there's so many classic scenes. And the soundtrack, not just the theme song, but the end of the movie song, and then there's just a bunch in there. But yeah, we're all rooting for video game movies. Cody, do you think there'll ever be a movie based on a video game that can win a serious Oscar? Like Best Director, or maybe have a Best Actor award. Do you think that could ever happen from a video game?
Absolutely. If a superhero movie can win an Oscar, we have Heath Ledger winning Best Supporting Actor, Black Panther nominated for Best Picture. It's only a matter of time before a movie based on a video game will win a prestige Oscar, like Best Picture or Best Director. I think it just comes down to good story and execution. And as we've mentioned, there are a lot of video games with great stories. It's just been the execution that has been the problem.
That's fair. What do you think are some possible future video games inspired movies? I'm wondering how there's not a Grand Theft Auto movie. I know there's a new Mortal Kombat game that's out. It's really popular, so I feel like there's always a market for a new Mortal Kombat movie. God of War is kind of a pretty popular game with a good story. Everyone's favorite, Mega Man. That guy deserves kind of like a Detective Pikachu movie or something. Metroid would be awesome. I don't know if Sigourney Weaver, but somebody like Sigourney Weaver playing Metroid, I could see being pretty cool. And then Donkey Kong, there's got to be something for Donkey Kong, like a live action Donkey Kong directed by Jon Favreau or something.
Yeah, possibly. Maybe their best bet at making a good video game movie would be to try out a Call of Duty movie and just make it a really good war film. Have a really good story with a really good character. Maybe nod at some of the video game elements throughout the film, but make it a really good war drama.
Another type of movie that is happening is the kind of late 20th century music biopic movie. Bohemian Rhapsody came out in late 2018, and I feel like people didn't love it, but that was popular. And then there's a new one coming out about Elton John. It has the kid from the Kingsman. So we have Rocketman coming out. We just had Bohemian Rhapsody. These musician biopic movies, are we just going to get 2 or more of these a year now?
Well, let's hope not. Bohemian Rhapsody had mixed reviews from the critics other than some of the performances, but it did make money. And Rocketman's score, Rotten Tomatoes score, is not out yet, but some of the buzz is good. In fact, Forbes said Paramount thinks that Rocketman's both a critical winner and a possible audience favorite. Not only is the movie getting a splashy premiere at this year's Cannes Film Festival on May 16th, but it's also the latest big movie to get a national paid sneak preview well before its actual domestic release date. So that's going to be Paramount partnering with Fandango. These movies usually turn out to be purely star vehicles. You have Rami Malek, who's a great actor. Bohemian Rhapsody earned him an Oscar for Best Actor. And so good for him. He was able to use that as a vehicle to make some other stuff. I do like Elton John. He still has a pretty big fan base, and so they'll turn out, but with a production budget of $40 million, it's going to need to make at least $100 to have been worth it. It probably will get there. Bohemian Rhapsody made $200 million domestic on a $52 million budget. Worldwide, it was up to even $900 million. If they can repeat that success, we'll keep getting these musician-themed biographical epics.
I'm excited for this movie. No matter what the movie is about, like Elton John has good music, and I'm sure they'll have his best songs in there. Even if the movie was horrible and I watched it, if I got to hear Tiny Dancer, Rocketman, Benny and the Jets, if I get to hear two of those, it would be worth it to see. Since we're getting like two or more of these a year now, what other musicians do you think will have movies about them coming down the pipeline?
I could see someone like Robert Pattinson playing a John Lennon, or having, John Lennon played by somebody like the kid from Game of Thrones who played Joffrey, if he's still acting. But in general, I think we'll get some more very popular artists. Maybe a Eddie Van Halen, maybe a Marilyn Manson biopic someday.
Here's what I think. I think there's going to be a David Bowie movie, and that could be played by Bill Skarsgård, that like weird brother of the Skarsgård family. Tom Petty could have a movie played by Ryan Gosling. That would be perfect.
Yeah, those would be interesting to see. Speaking of movies coming out soon, Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is just announced is headed to Cannes Film Festival, so we didn't know if he would get it done in time. According to Forbes, "We were afraid the film would not be ready," the festival's artistic director said in a statement. But Quentin Tarantino, who has not left the editing room in 4 months, is a real and loyal, punctual child of Cannes. He also said the film due in cinemas on July 26 was a love letter to the Hollywood of Tarantino's childhood, as well as, quote, an ode to cinema as a whole. So I think that will be interesting. I'm a big Tarantino fan. I'm not sure if I've gotten your take on Tarantino yet. He has a movie theater out in LA, and so I might have to make the trip out there to see that film's premiere at his theater in person.
So that theater is owned by Quentin Tarantino. Like, did he buy an old theater, or was it like one that he built in LA?
The building was built in the 20s, but it became a movie theater around the 1950s. Just showed regular new movies, and it's been a few different things. A nightclub. It's just one theater, one little room with slight incline. It feels almost like a movie theater from the 70s. It had some seedier days. It was used in the 70s for like adult films. Recently has become a revival cinema, which is, they'll show indie movies on actual film.
So speaking of Quentin Tarantino, the guy owns a theater. He's just been around movies his whole career. Like, can you get burned out, or is he just getting more into movies throughout his life? This movie the one you were talking about, is supposed to be his 9th movie, and he said before that he only wants to have 10 movies. That's why The Hateful Eight was called The Hateful Eight. That's his 8th movie. Do you think that after he finishes that 10th movie, do you think he'll continue to write and direct movies? You could look at Martin Scorsese, and he's still going strong in his late 70s. Do you think Quentin Tarantino could maybe get involved with some shows? I know that Martin Scorsese, he directed an episode of Boardwalk Empire for HBO, and he's gotten involved with that. What do you think's next for Quentin Tarantino's career? I
know he wants to leave before he starts making bad movies, because he said that a lot of the best directors, their last few films are not very impressive. And so he wants to go out on a high note, leave the audience wanting more. I do think that he'll still stay creative. So he's mentioned things about like writing novels and writing plays and things like that. So I do think that he'll always do that. I'm really curious to see what his 10th movie will be.
How do you think he'll go down? Let's say there's like a class of the best directors. I put Martin Scorsese in there, Stanley Kubrick, Alfred Hitchcock. Do you think he's good enough to be in that category, or do you think he'll be kind of a notch below them?
I see him more as a writer than a director. I think he does well at both. And so I think he'll go down as one of the top 5 writers for sure, especially when it comes to dialogue. As far as directors, top 10, yeah, I can definitely see him holding a spot. He's crafted his own genre of films. When you see a Quentin Tarantino movie, you know it's a Quentin Tarantino movie. Yes, it's a crime action film, but each one of them has that Tarantino DNA running through it. And I'm not sure any other directors have really done that as well. We saw a film last night called Shadow, directed by the guy who did Hero and House of Flying Daggers, and I think maybe he's another example of someone who has maybe crafted their own genre of films. But I think Tarantino has done that very successfully in his career, and so I definitely think he'll be in the top 10.
All right, so in this podcast, what we do is me and Cody will recommend movies to each other, and then we'll each watch the other's movies, and then we'll talk about it. Last week, I recommended Cody to watch Good Time. Robert Pattinson, the guy from Twilight, plays a super greasy guy who's also like super resourceful when he needs to be. Pattinson, in the beginning of the movie, just like the setup, he uses his brother, and his brother has like a cognitive disability, but he uses him to rob a bank. His brother ends up in jail, and Robert Pattinson, he needs to find the bail money to get him out of jail. And then his adventure kind of starts from there. What did you think of Good Time, Cody?
It was a fun little movie. Maybe give it a 7.5 out of 10. I liked it. I enjoyed watching it. We'll start with what I liked. Robert Pattinson, he gave a great performance. Much better than in some of the Twilight movies. He's shown himself as being really good at taking these indie roles and being more of a character actor. The story itself was fairly compelling. I was interested the entire time in what was going to happen to him and his brother, and if he was going to be able to get himself out of the sticky situation that he had gotten himself in. The characters were all unique and interesting. Even some of the smaller roles I felt like connected to and was interested in what was happening with them. What I didn't like, the number one thing was the cinematography. It was one of those movies where the camera is super close to people's face the entire time using a really long lens, so the background is out of focus. I'm not sure why. It's sort of disorienting to watch as a movie. It almost felt like a TV show. You know, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but cutting to a wide shot that's just good cinema. I like to see these big, beautiful, wide shots with wide lenses occasionally. And then also I felt like he got away with a little bit too much. His character got lucky way too many times throughout the movie. But other than that, like I said, 7.5 out of 10. It was a fun one. Good recommendation.
One of the things I loved about Good Time was the soundtrack was just like a crazy 80s sci-fi synth soundtrack, and it kind of like created this weird, like desperate mood for the whole movie. Did you like the soundtrack to it?
I did. It was cool. It fit the film for sure. I thought a few times it maybe tried to draw too much attention to itself, but I thought it fit the feel of the film overall.
One last thing I'll say about Good Time, if you're listening and considering watching it, it's just one of those movies where you feel awful the whole time, and then after you're done, like whatever's going on in your life, no matter how hard it is, you're just like, well, at least I didn't have to go through that situation that Robert Pattinson did. At least I'm not in his shoes for this movie. And you recommended I watch this movie called Double Indemnity. Could you tell us what Double Indemnity was about?
It's one of my favorites. It's another old movie. So if you remember last time I recommended Zach watch Sunset Boulevard, directed by Billy Wilder. This one was also directed by Billy Wilder. This one is sort of the black and white 50s, 40s detective smoking a cigarette with the, woman in the red dress who needs help. It's about an insurance salesman who meets a woman who wants to murder her husband and collect the insurance money. And for some reason, I still don't know why, I think he was just attracted to her, he decides to help her through this. So he's an insurance salesman, and he is able to navigate the system pretty well, but the events don't play out necessarily the way you think. Even though we've seen this story a few times, it does it really well. It was made in 1944, though, so I'm really curious to see if you like it, since you're not usually partial to older movies.
Yeah, because it was made in 1944, I automatically hate it. No, I'll be honest, this movie was pretty entertaining. It had that vibe I love, that like corporate vibe, like middle of the century, everyone chain smoking at their desk at work, drinking scotch. It felt like the show Mad Men. It has that same like business corporate boardroom vibe to it, and I felt like Mad Men kind of like based their show off this movie. It's also one of these movies where like your main character is like super slick. He's a insurance salesman, and he's like a super slick salesman. He interacts with everyone in like a clever way. There's a guy at his insurance company. He's the guy who approves whether there's a claim, if it's legitimate or not. And his character's awesome. You know, he's like in suspenders. He's like all ready to go. I would say I'd go with like a 7 out of 10, a light 7 out of 10. What kept me from loving this movie was it just had its cheesy dialogue moments. Like, just there'd be conversations where they just give these big boisterous speeches and declarations of love. I know it's from another era, but I just don't think it ages well, and I just kind of like, But overall, it was like a solid movie, especially considering it was made 80 years ago. That's what I think of Cody's recommendation. And so next episode, we're going to be discussing some other movies, so we need to give our recommendations. Cody, what will you be recommending I watch?
So I'm going to have you for next time watch the movie Amadeus. Now, this has nothing to do with Amistad, the film about slaves coming over on a slave ship. This is made in 1984. It plays a little fast and loose with the history, but it's mostly about the Italian composer Antonio Salieri and his rivalry with Mozart, the composer. And they're at the court of Emperor Joseph II. So it's all about really Salieri being jealous of Mozart and how that relationship plays out. It's not necessarily a comedy, but it is hilarious. It's just a good movie. So check that out. It's called Amadeus from 1984.
Cody, next week, I'm going to have you watch a movie called The Mule. It's an Australian movie. It's not connected to Clint Eastwood's The Mule that just came out. It's not a remake or connected to that in any way. But it's about this easy manipulated guy, and he gets pressured into smuggling drugs from Thailand back to Australia. It's an awesome movie. It's like really fun and silly, but there's also like a lot of tension in it. It has Mr. Anderson from The Matrix, so that's automatically good. Can't wait to see what you say about it.
All right. Well, I'll definitely check that out. And for the folks at home, check out the movies we talked about today or the movies that we'll talk about next time.
Yeah, thanks everybody for listening again. We've gotten great feedback from you guys, and we just want to make an entertaining movie podcast, so thanks for listening. Also, with these movie recommendations, feel free to like put in the comments or something movies we should watch in future episodes, and then we'll consider them. We probably won't watch them, but we'll look at them. And that's all for us. Thanks everybody for listening.